jQuery. Okay, what is it? Why we're going to use it? Well, let's just run through some of the high-level concepts here. So jQuery is what's known as a library. It's a library written in JavaScript. So let's remove that misnomer first of all. jQuery is JavaScript. It's not an alternative to JavaScript. It is JavaScript. But what it does is it allows you as a developer to, as their tagline says, write less and do more. So you can be more efficient in the code that you write, because jQuery have developed lots of helper methods to make it much easier for us as developers. It's fairly small, about 88k if you've not got the non-gzipped one. It has cross-browser support, although this was the big selling point in the early days when browsers were a little bit flaky in their support for JavaScript. Very, very popular. So let's just have a look what kind of stuff we can do with jQuery and the examples that we'll be kind of looking at through these movies. So I'll just refresh this. So you've seen this kind of banner stuff, often related to cookies. We can create that, have that disappear, and say write less, do more. The code for that is just as simple as that. Okay, if you attempt to do that in normal vanilla JavaScript, which we'll start referring to JavaScript as vanilla JavaScript as opposed to jQuery, which is JavaScript as well, but is a library, then that's a very lightweight bit of code in order to do that. Lots of fun things on this page, all done with jQuery, all very lightweight to apply, little form validation things going on there. Just show you another popular use. Go to the mobile view. These kind of burger menu, slide up, slide down effects, very easy to achieve with jQuery. So it's a library. It's a library of features for you to choose and deploy as you see fit, as opposed to the other concept that you'll come across in the JavaScript world, which is a framework. So frameworks are things like React and Angular and Vue.js. These are opinionated ways of working in JavaScript, whereas jQuery is a library which provides you with, you imagine, a whole series of methods and functions, like a library of books, and you just choose which one you want, pull it off the shelf and deploy it, allowing you to write less code but to do more, to be more efficient. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is get jQuery in your project so that you can use it, and that's what we'll look at next. So how do we get and how do we install jQuery, as it were? Well, there are a couple of options. Basically, it is just a JavaScript file, so you can go to the jQuery site and you can download it from here, from the big download button. So when you click on that, you'll find there are numerous different versions, and you've got the compressed version that looks like so. So you can see it's just one big massive JavaScript file. There's things like functions, variable declarations, each loops. It is just a massive JavaScript function in effect. So that's the file that you generally use. So what you could do is you could just save a copy of that. You could put it into your scripts folder within your project. So I'll just save that. And I've got a little Visual Studio Code project set up here. So in scripts now, there is that file ready for me to use. Okay, the other file that you have on there is the uncompressed version, and that's a nice readable version of the file. That's for people who want to have a look through and maybe contribute to the project, because it is an open source project. So that's if you want to have a look and see the mechanics of what's actually going on, it's all in there for you to read. Okay, so that's one option. Now the other option is you could use what is known as a CDN. Now a CDN is a content distribution network, and this is where some kind people out there will host the jQuery file for you. So most famously Google have an API section on their site, and there you see is jQuery, the different versions. So 3.4.1 at the time of recording is the latest one. So that's the one that I could use as well. So I could just reference the file off the Google servers instead. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, there are a couple of benefits to using a CDN. You don't have to host a file. You can just let it sit on someone else's servers like Google's. So you don't have any bandwidth costs because they will pick that up. But every time someone visits your page, it's coming off the Google servers, not yours. And a big benefit is that the file might be cached by users. If you consider that, I mean the statistics vary, but if you consider that about 70% of pages have used jQuery, then there's a good chance that the user's already visited the site using jQuery, and if they've used the same CDN, it's cached, so that will speed up the download of the page slightly. But I fully appreciate that some people do not want to use a CDN because it's files on someone else's server. So if you're hosting it, you can just link to it. It would be 3.4.1, or you can use the CDN where you link to the Google site. So let's just see that in action. So what I'm going to do is, first I'll start off with the CDN version. So I'll just see if I copied that. I don't remember if I did. So I'll grab that. So I'll grab that script file and I'm going to put it in the head of my HTML file here. So it's going to go and load that file for me. Now I need to be able to test that that is actually the case. So what I'm going to do is, well, if I just save that, we'll come to another test in a second, and I'll go and look at my page and I'll inspect it and come out of mobile view, go to network, there's JS, let's just refresh. You can see it's picking up that, so I'm getting a 200, it's a successful find of that file. Okay, so that's coming, you can see off Google. So you can do it that way. Alternatively, so that is using a CDN, Content Distribution Network. Now if you don't want to do it that way, fine, I'll just comment that one out. And what I could then do is, remember I downloaded a copy of this, so I do have a copy in my scripts folder in this file structure. So therefore what I could do is, again, I could put it as script tag. So let's comment this up first of all. So this is going to be using local copy. Just comment that out, which is Control / on the Visual Studio Code. So we want a script, source, hit tab, and we want to go into the scripts folder, and I've got this file here. So that's exactly the same one as this, but it's stored locally. Save that, go back to my browser, refresh. There's the file again, but this time you see it's coming off my local drive. So either is valid, it's entirely up to you which technique you would like to use. Now that's downloading it, but another test would be to make sure that jQuery is all fully functioning. I wouldn't see that there be a problem in either of these two cases, but let's just move on to checking that jQuery is actually working okay for us. So I'm going to stick a script tag in here. It's going ahead of the document. We could easily place this in an external file, and maybe we'll do that in a second. So once you've got jQuery downloaded, the magic is all around this $sign. Now the $sign basically calls the jQuery function. So what it does is in here it calls this massive function here. That's what $is calling. And then we can pass parameters to it. So if I open up the parenthesis, I can pass some parameters to it. And what I'm going to pass to it is document. Now document, this is where you need to understand JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, because you see the two mix together. So document is the document object model. Something you could look back at one of my previous movies to see the explanation of that. So basically what I'm doing is I'm passing the document through to jQuery. And then I'm going to call a helper function called ready. And you see how Visual Studio Code knows all about jQuery. So it knows there is something called ready. And ready is a helper method. So there is no ready method in vanilla JavaScript, but the jQuery developers have written a helper method that abstracts away basically on load. So that's basically checking to see whether the document has loaded correctly. So I can open up the parenthesis, and because ready is what's known as an event, it takes an event handler. So I can then put in here a function and put parenthesis in, and then put curly brace in like so. So this construct document.ready is a very common construct in the jQuery world. So what you're doing is you're saying, is the document ready? And if it is, let's call this function here, and all our code will then go inside of that function. So I won't do an alert like in those slides there, I'll do a console. So console.info jQuery is ready. So I'll save that, and let's go back to my browser and refresh. Let's go to the console and refresh, and there we go. We can see that jQuery is working perfectly well, understands everything. It's loading the library and it understands what that dollar means. If I didn't have that library installed, I'll just uninstall it for a second, and you'll see it doesn't know what the dollar is. So when you see this message, dollar is not defined, it means that you haven't linked to jQuery successfully. Let's again prove here if I switch that one on, the CDN version. So I've now got the CDN version running, and just make sure my comments are all appropriately set up. So now I'm loading the content distribution one off Google, and I'll go and I'll refresh, and you see it works perfectly well in that case as well. So it's your choice. You can either use a local copy or you can use a CDN. And then if you're going to place your code in the header of the document, generally recommended with jQuery that you do this anyway, that you put in a document.ready function, and then all of your code would go in at that point there. One last thing about the architecture of this, I could create a new file, let's call it main.js, externally, so in my scripts folder there. Just prove this will all work in that way as well. So I'm going to cut that code from there, put that inside of there. And then what I could then do is I could link to that script file. So I could say script source, scripts main, and I could link to it that way if you want to keep your code separated in a different file, which is often a good idea. So let's save that. Let's go back to the browser, and I'll go to network and refresh. So you'll see it loads both of these two. And if I go to the console is working absolutely fine as well. So we can structure our file in that way as well. And the document.ready, all of our code. So we'd start the code there, and then we would end the code there. Lots of other ways you could structure this, but that's going to work for us. So we'll put all of our code inside of the document.ready. So the next thing to do is to look at the way that the way that jQuery can select elements in the DOM, and that'll be the first instance where we see that you can use much lighter code.